What if the most powerful job in China was won not in one dramatic election, but through decades of surviving tests almost nobody outside the system could see? Xi Jinping's rise is a story of family prestige, political hardship, provincial administration, careful positioning, and a party system where advancement depends on trust as much as popularity. Born in Beijing in 1953, Xi was the son of Xi Jinping, a veteran communist revolutionary who later suffered political persecution. That family history gave the younger Xi both a connection to the party elite and an early lesson that status could disappear overnight. Actually, the important clue is that Xi's path was never a straight climb from privilege to power. He spent years far from Beijing, then worked through local and regional posts before entering the national leadership. By the time he became China's top party leader in 2012, he had already spent roughly 3 decades building a resume inside the system. Xi's childhood collided with one of modern China's most turbulent political periods. During the Cultural Revolution, his father's political fall changed the family's circumstances, and in 1969, the teenage Xi was sent to rural Liangjiahe in Shanxi as part of the sent-down youth movement. Life there was physically demanding, with basic housing, farm work, and a very different environment from Beijing. Xi later made those years central to his public biography, presenting them as a period of endurance and connection with royal China. Whatever one thinks of the later political storytelling, the experience mattered because it placed him inside the social world of ordinary village life, while his family name carried political complications. He applied repeatedly to join the Communist Party and was admitted in 1974. The next year, he entered Tsinghua University to study chemical engineering. Those steps did not make him a national figure, but they rebuilt a path into the party-state system after years of uncertainty. After university, Xi did something that revealed how political careers in China can mix personal networks with bureaucratic apprenticeship. He worked from 1979 to 1982 as a secretary to Gan Biao, a senior official who served in major defense and government posts. That position gave Xi exposure to central politics, but he did not stay in Beijing and wait for promotion. Instead, he moved to Dongding County in Hebei, where he served as deputy party secretary and then party secretary. Now, county-level work may sound small compared with national leadership, but in China's system you can function like a long practical exam. Officials are judged through administration, economic performance, discipline, relationships with superiors, and their ability to implement priorities. Dongding gave Xi direct responsibility for the local economy and bureaucracy. It also began a pattern that would define his rise. Accept a post, learn the local political terrain, show reliability, and move upward only after accumulating evidence that he could manage larger organizations. The next major chapter was Fujian, where Xi spent about 17 years in a province facing the coast and deeply connected to trade, investment, and migration. Beginning in Xiamen, he moved through leadership posts in Ningde and Fuzhou, eventually becoming deputy provincial party secretary and governor. This long stroke mattered because it was not a single lucky appointment. It was repeated exposure to local government at different scales. He dealt with development, private enterprise, infrastructure, and the practical tension between central rules and local experimentation. Well, this is where the boring-looking parts of a political biography become important. National leaders are often remembered for speeches, but promotion can depend on thousands of less visible decisions about budgets, personnel, campaigns, and crises. In Fujian, Xi developed a reputation as a cautious administrator rather than a flamboyant political celebrity. That image of steadiness would later become useful when party elites were looking for a leader who proved experienced, disciplined, and broadly acceptable. In 2002, Xi moved to Zhejiang, one of China's most commercially dynamic provinces, first as acting governor and then as provincial party secretary. Zhejiang's economy was packed with private businesses, exporters, and fast-growing cities, so governing it required a different skill set from poorer royal areas. Xi publicly emphasized development, entrepreneurship, and what he called a cleaner relationship between government and business. He also wrote short commentaries that later became associated with his governing ideas. Actually, Zhejiang gave Xi a platform where economic performance and political management were visible at national scale. He was no longer merely one official among thousands. He was running a province whose success mattered to China's wider growth story. Yet he still avoided building a highly theatrical public persona. His style looked measured, and that helped him appear less threatening to different factions inside the leadership. By the mid-2000s, his resume now combined rural experience, coastal administration, economic management, and party discipline. Then came a promotion that lasted only months but changed everything. In March 2007, Xi was sent to Shanghai as the city's party secretary after a corruption scandal had damaged the local leadership. Shanghai was not just another city. It was a financial center and one of the most politically important posts in the country. Xi's assignment signaled that senior leaders trusted him to stabilize a sensitive organization without creating another crisis. Wait. The speed of what followed is the real clue. By October 2007, he entered the Politburo Standing Committee, the small group at the top of the Communist Party's decision-making hierarchy. That leap placed him directly in the national succession conversation. He became vice president in 2008, took responsibility for major national tasks, and became vice chairman of the Central Military Commission in 2010. In a system where succession is prepared through elite consensus, those appointments increasingly mark Xi as the leading candidate to succeed Hu Jintao. How do you rise inside a political system where millions of party members exist, but only a handful ever reach the top? The answer is less like winning a nationwide popularity contest and more like passing through a narrowing pyramid of appointments. China's Communist Party controls key leadership positions across provinces, ministries, state institutions, and the military, while senior appointments are shaped by performance records, patronage networks, political trust, age norms, and internal bargaining. Xi's career fit that machinery unusually well over time. He had a revolutionary family background, but also decades of work outside Beijing, experience in poorer and richer regions, and no public image as a reckless factional warrior. Actually, political science helps explain why this combination mattered. In a weak selection systems, a candidate can become powerful by being acceptable to several groups before later building a stronger personal coalition. Xi's rise to 2007 therefore looks less mysterious. He accumulated credentials across different environments until he became difficult to dismiss as inexperienced or narrowly regional. At the 18th Party Congress in November 2012, Xi Jinping became General Secretary of the Communist Party and Chairman of the party's Central Military Commission. Those two roles mattered more than the presidency because the party sits above the state in China's political structure, and control of the military is a separate pillar of authority. In March 2013, Xi was elected president, completing control of the three major leadership centers: party, military, and state. Now, succession did not automatically tell anyone how he would govern. Some observers initially expected a relatively conventional leader operating within the collective norms that had developed after Mao's era. Instead, Xi moved quickly to strengthen central party authority and his own position within it. He chaired new leading groups, made major policy speeches, and linked his leadership to the idea of national rejuvenation. The transition from heir apparent to dominant leader was not instantaneous, but the direction became clear within his first few years in office. One of Xi's most powerful tools was the anti-corruption campaign launched soon after he took office. The campaign targeted both high-ranking officials, often described as tigers, and lower-level cadres, or flies. It punished genuine corruption on a vast scale and responded to public anger about officials abusing power. At the same time, analysts have argued that the campaign also weakened rival networks and increased political discipline around Xi's leadership. Seriously, both effects can be true at once. A campaign can address a real governance problem while also changing the balance of power inside the institution enforcing it. Senior figures who once appeared untouchable were investigated. Military officers were removed, and officials across the bureaucracy became more cautious. This altered incentives throughout the system. Loyalty, compliance, and political discipline became even more important. By attacking corruption and reorganizing supervision, Xi was not merely cleaning individual cases. He was reshaping how officials understood risk, authority, and the center of political gravity. Xi also changed the language and structure of leadership. The party increasingly described him as its core, and Xi Jinping thought was written into the party constitution in 2017. New commissions and leading bodies brought major policy areas closer to top-level party control, while the party expanded its role across government, business, education, and society. In fact, this is a classic example of institutional centralization. Decisions that were previously dispersed across committees or agencies become more coordinated around a central leader and a smaller circle. Supporters argue that centralization can reduce fragmentation, enforce long-term priorities, and make a huge bureaucracy move in one direction. Critics argue that it can reduce policy debate, weaken internal checks, and make mistakes harder to correct because fewer people are willing to challenge the top. The science here is organizational rather than biological. Large systems trade off speed and unity against feedback and flexibility. Xi's leadership pushed that balance strongly toward unity, discipline, and centralized direction. The biggest constitutional symbol of that shift arrived in 2018. China's constitution had limited the state presidency to 2 consecutive terms, even though the more powerful party general secretary position did not have the same written limit. The National People's Congress approved an amendment removing the presidential term limit, opening the legal possibility for Xi to remain president beyond the previous 10-year pattern. Wait. The deeper change was not simply one sentence in a constitution. It confirmed that the succession expectations built after Deng Xiaoping were being rewritten around Xi's continued leadership. In 2022, he secured a 3rd term as general secretary, breaking the recent norm of stepping down after 2 5-year terms. In 2023, he was elected to a 3rd presidential term. That sequence showed how far his position had moved from the cautious, consensus-based image associated with his early rise. A leader once seen as broadly acceptable to the system had become the system's unmistakable center. What if Xi had remained only a consensus manager instead of becoming China's most dominant leader in decades? China's recent history might have looked more like a rotating executive committee, with stronger factional bargaining and a clear expectation of succession after 10 years. That could have produced more internal debate, but it might also have made coordination across a vast party state slower and less consistent. Believe it or not, this counterfactual helps explain why Xi's rise cannot be reduced to personality alone. He inherited institutions already worried about corruption, inequality, military modernization, slowing growth, and the party's long-term legitimacy. Those pressures created demand for stronger coordination even before his full consolidation. Xi then used the powers, crises, and opportunities of the office to push much further toward centralization than many observers expected. History rarely offers a clean experiment, so we cannot know the alternative outcome. But comparing paths shows that leadership style and institutional conditions worked together, each making the other more consequential. Xi's rise also mattered economically because political authority and economic policy are tightly connected in China. His first decade included ambitious industrial policy, stronger party influence in companies, efforts to reduce financial risks, campaigns against poverty, and a push for technological self-reliance. At different moments, private firms experienced both encouragement and heavier regulation, while the property sector and local government debt became major challenges. Now, the social impact is complicated because China is too large for one simple verdict. Central direction can mobilize resources quickly, but uncertainty about regulation can make businesses cautious. Major infrastructure and technology goals can create new capacity, while debt and demographic pressures can limit growth. For ordinary households, national strategy eventually becomes concrete through jobs, housing, education costs, pensions, and confidence about the future. Xi's rise therefore changed more than elite politics. By concentrating political authority, it also changed how investors, entrepreneurs, local officials, and families interpret signals from Beijing and calculate what risks are worth taking. As of July 2026, Xi remained General Secretary of the Communist Party, Chairman of the Central Military Commission, and President of China, holding the same 3 top positions that defined his leadership after 2013. His continuing tenure makes succession one of the biggest unanswered questions in Chinese politics. No publicly designated successor has emerged in the clear way observers once expected under earlier leadership norms. In fact, the longer a system centers authority on one leader, the more important the eventual transition becomes. Future leaders must preserve enough continuity to avoid instability by deciding which policies, institutions, and governing habits to keep. Xi has tied his era to goals extending into the 2030s and beyond, including modernization, technological strength, national development, and stronger party leadership. Whether that produces durable institutions or greater dependence on one political center, will be judged over decades, not election cycles. The future of Xi's system may ultimately reveal as much about his rise as the commotions that created it. So what actually explains the rise of Xi Jinping? Not one secret meeting, one family connection, or one spectacular speech, but a chain of experiences that kept increasing his value inside the party system. He endured political upheaval, rebuilt his path through party membership and university, learned central politics, governed at county and provincial levels, handled economically important regions, and entered national leadership at the right moment. Alright, the final twist is that the qualities that helped him rise as a seemingly steady, broadly acceptable insider did not predict the full scale of authority he would later accumulate. Once at the top, he used anti-corruption, institutional reform, ideological authority, personnel choices, and changes to succession norms to reshape the office around himself. The rise, therefore, has two chapters. First, how Xi became the chosen successor. Second, how the chosen successor transformed the structure he inherited. Understanding both chapters is essential to understanding China under Xi today.